On today's episode, Spartan European Championships and the OCR European Championships. Welcome to the OCR Report podcast, brought to you by the OCRReport.com. We are the only podcast to focus exclusively on the elite sport of obstacle course racing, from Spartan to Tough Mudder to the OCR World Championships, and wherever the elites are racing, we are there. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the OCR Report. Jack Bauer, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Will. I know it's been a while, and there's certainly been a lot going on in the OCR world, not necessarily in the U.S., but overseas for sure.
Recently, the European OCR circuit had some action. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so you had on the same exact day or same exact weekend, they had Spartan Race European Championships and the OCR European Championships. So just think of what they're having at Stratton Mountain in Vermont, and that's basically for NORAM Championship. That's kind of what ended up going on in Poland on the same exact weekend as the Spartan European Championship. So a lot of talent out, and as far as I know, I didn't see anybody in like the top 20, 25 who went to both venues, one of them being in Italy, the other in Poland. Just logistically, that would be pretty difficult to pull off, but it must have been a tough choice for a lot of them. Did you end up looking at any of the results?
I did. I've looked at the results, and you see names that you recognize, that we recognize from the Europeans. I didn't recognize any U.S. names that went over there, but it looks like everyone had to make a choice. Do I want to race the Spartan European Championships, or do I want to race the maybe more established in Europe, the OCR European Championships?
Exactly. And it looked like, honestly, in terms of the bigger names, the John Albin, Sergei Perelegin, Peter Shiska, and a lot of the Albert Soler, some of the bigger names that you'll see on a weekly basis, those were the guys who ended up choosing Spartan. Meanwhile, OCR European Championship, a lot of the Eastern European and just very rig-based athletes, a lot of them elected for that. But in terms of recognizable names for fans in the U.S., it seemed like the majority of the recognizable names ended up going with Spartan.
Let's talk about the OCR European Championships first, and then we'll talk about the Spartan results. Sure. Tell me about the OCR European Championships.
So last year, I don't know if you remember, but I think there were 12 or 13 men total who did not get their band cut, and there was only one woman. So the only finisher, she was the winner for the short course last year. John Albin, he ended up dropping out or getting his band cut, and just so many people were complaining that it was just way too. It wasn't reflective of what OCR truly is. It was much more ninja based and just way too grip intensive. A lot of people getting their hands just busted open, and it looked just like war out there. So they've switched it up this year. However, it was still very obstacle dense. Last year's winner was Leon Kofod. A lot of people didn't know the name back then, but he was the heavy favorite into the short course heading back this year. And he ended up repeating. He had a great battle with Sergei Silin, who ended up getting second in the 15K in London this past year to John Albin. He was only about 30 seconds back of Albin at OCR Worlds 2018. So it was a really good battle. And I want to give a shout out to Nikolai Dam. He had some great coverage. He was literally sprinting around following Leon all day or all race, just cheering for him. The guy was hilarious just behind the mic. He was just his commentary was awesome, and it gave a really good perspective on just what the course was like. But in the final results, Leon ended up getting to the last rig at just about the same time as Sergei, but Leon ended up getting a 13-second win when everything was all said and done. It was a great race, super entertaining, and Seb David also, give him a shout out. He has a pretty good video on his Facebook page where it's about a 15-minute breakdown of just what some of the obstacles were, what the course was like, how the festival area looked. It was a really well-designed course, but I think it was a really, really entertaining race for the men. And then for the women, Katja Christensen ended up getting second behind Corinne Carlson, and another name that you'll probably recognize, I know you will, from the Toughest Mudder 8-hour races. She had a really good showing last year. Ulrika Evanson, she ended up getting third in the short course. She was leading early on. I watched some of the covers, and then you kind of disappeared just because they couldn't put the camera on the leaders at all times. And then they'd go between the genders, and by the time they ended up catching back to the women, Corinne was in the lead, and she held on for the win.
I'm happy to see Ulrika on the podium there. She got hurt toward the end of last year and wasn't able to run in World's Toughest Mudder. I think she would have done well if she hadn't been injured. So it's good to see that she's made a comeback.
Yeah, really good versatility. I mean, she was definitely all in on World's Toughest Mudder. I think she either got 35 or 40 miles at toughest, I think, Germany, if I'm not mistaken. And that is pretty legit. Very few women have ended up reaching that 40 barrier. So she's got some great endurance.
She did real good at toughest UK in
UK.
In Germany, she's actually where she. I don't know if she realized she was injured there, but I think she did one lap and then she ended up limping and was carried through her second or third lap there.
Gotcha. But that just shows you the versatility. I mean, podium at the short course, granted it was a 52-minute short course, but podium there but also being a great ultra athlete, it's kind of the not quite Ryan Atkins-esque, but that range is really impressive.
Looking at these results for the short course, the OCR European Championships, it looks like some open waivers actually did pretty well in the results here. Yeah,
I was intentionally not mentioning that yet. So I told you Leon ended up winning. Sergey Tilling got second in the elite race. Well, they weren't even the fastest people of the entire day. Ruben Dinkelman from the Netherlands, he actually ended up completing the course 58 seconds faster than Leon, but he ended up competing in the 25 to 29 age group. And Sebastian Kasperzik, he ended up competing in the 18 to 24 division, and he was over 30 seconds faster than Leon. So there were actually two age groupers who outright had a faster time than Leon. Leon ends up being the OCR European short course champion, however, because he competed in the elite division. So it's really interesting. That never, especially on the men's side. It's happened a couple times. I think the New Jersey Beast this year, there were age groupers who finished faster than the elite winner on the women's side. But I've looked at results way too many times, and I've yet to see an age group male end up being the overall champion. So for that to happen was really, really surprising. And I think a lot of it might have happened because it's OCR European Championship. It's the biggest one if you're not going to travel for OCR Worlds if you're European. And after seeing just the disaster that happened last year with only about a dozen men finishing, I'm sure a lot of people might have been like, you know what, I'm doing age group. I'm not gonna risk having 3 people finish under an hour and it just be a brutal course the whole time. I'm just gonna do age group just due to the intimidation factor, or they just might not have felt like they wanted to race elite because they didn't think they'd stand a chance against some of the people. And then clearly their obstacle ability really paid off. And then it wasn't just the top 2. It looks like 5th through 9th fastest overall, and 1st and 2nd. So 7 of the top 9 fastest men were age groupers. That's incredible. Are the age groupers, are they held to the same standards as far as obstacle completion and penalties? Are they running the exact same course? Yeah, as far as I'm aware from watching the live videos, men and women both had the same exact course. And I think it was all the 25 to 29-year-olds went off at once. All the 18 to 24-year-olds went off at once and then waited a few minutes for the next group. And all the elites went together. I know they had two separate men's groups for the short course and then one for the women sending them off. There were maybe 60 or 70 men who went off. But everyone had the same exact course. It looked like there was a little bit of rain later in the day, but I don't think it wasn't a downpour. I don't think it affected the results that much. But obviously rain and the elements do have a little bit of an impact, but the course it looked like a really, really fun event for that short course for sure. And one other thing that I was going to mention on that, did you know that they were strictly enforcing a 15-second rest period? You know how a lot of people, they'll do a rig and then there's like a section where they can kind of chicken wing and hang there for a minute to get their grips, sure, or to get their grip back. They actually had military officers out there literally counting down 15 seconds. And if you took more than 15 seconds hanging rest or waiting, you literally failed the obstacle, they'd kick you off. And I thought that was a really unique way of kind of officiating just to prevent backups. But at the same time, it also creates backups if you bail because then you have to go back to the retry lane. But what are your thoughts on having a policy like that? In concept, I love it. My initial thought is you're going to need volunteers to do that. And then were they counting to like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, or did they have some kind of watch? Well, they were all uniformed military members. I don't think that they had a stopwatch for each person, but they were going over to the people, like tapping them on the shit, like, hey, you got to get off, sorry.
If someone's counting like 1 to St. Petersburg, 2 St. Petersburg faster than the other guy is, then I don't know if it'd work. But if they got clocks and if you got the volunteers and manpower, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty innovative thing, because a lot of people, they'll just kind of take their time and, hang out right at the start of it. They'll kind of claim their lane and then take as long as possible to shake out their arms until the line behind them gets kind of pissed that they're taking so long. But I think in theory, it's definitely a really cool idea. I just don't know how practical it is when the competition gets super deep, especially when you have retry lanes that might take 15 minutes for you to get to do a reattempt on if the line gets that bad on a harder obstacle. So could work, might not work, but it was a good test run for them for sure.
Any last thoughts on the 6K before we talk about the long course?
Let's go to long course.
So the day after the 6K race was the 15-kilometer, the standard course at the OCR European Championships. Tell me about that race.
Yeah, so last year, John Albin and Thibaut Debuchet, they ended up having a very controversial finish. Do you remember that when?
I do. Yeah. John Albin was in the lead, and he was finishing the last obstacle. And it was the end of the race was actually on like a running track, right?
It was basically you pull your rope back. Yeah, it was on the last 100 meter, basically a home stretch of a track. They had maybe 50 feet to go. You pull a rope back, you swing, and you land over a line, and then whoever crosses the finish line after that, that's it. But then they had a miscommunication. John wasn't sure about pulling it back, or there was a mix-up, and Thibaut, he ended up having a just crazy finish, just rolled down a cargo net super fast, jumped over, pulled his rope up, and then ended up edging John by a second. But then there was a whole timing chip issue where I think John started 1 second back, so his actual gun time versus net time was, or his net time was tied with Thibaut, so they ended up being co-European champ. It was very, very controversial, and I think John, had he been instructed on what it was a very simple obstacle at the end of the race. I think he would have won, but you got to give credit where credit's due, and Thibaut had a great finish last year. But he did not repeat this year. He ended up being 4th place, not too far back, but actually he was about 5 minutes back off the win this year. But I don't think anybody saw this coming. First 2 guys, I've heard of everybody in OCR, and I never heard of these guys. So I was honestly really surprised. Tomas Osliswo, I think that's how you pronounce it. Google Translate did not do me good on this one. It has an L with a slash in it. I don't know that letter, so I tried my best. But he ended up being the champion. He was an hour and 34 minutes, and he was about a minute 20 seconds faster than Artyom Toshka. He was the 2nd place finisher. 2 very big surprises. Thomas Speil, he is actually a very accomplished Belgian racer. I've seen him right at the top of several lists. He's taken down some big names all across Europe. He's done OCR series, and he's had some really good results. He actually just ended up winning the Morzine Super, and he was 4th place in the Beast. He was leading it for quite a while this past weekend. Believe that was his first ever Spartan. But guy's legit. But he ended up being the 3rd place finisher, and they had about a 3-minute cushion on Thibaut Debuchet and Tom Twaddell, who is a 50-miler from Toughest last year. So some a lot better competition in the standard course, the 15K on the men's side. Leon Kofod, who won the short course, he ended up finishing 9th, and Axel Mendez, he's pretty well known in Europe as well. He was 10th, but Sergey Silin, who ended up getting 2nd in the elite, 4th actual overall in the short course, he ended up DNFing despite leading a good amount of the race. So clearly the obstacles just kind of added up for him. And Nikolai Dam, who I gave a shout out to earlier for the great coverage, maybe he shouldn't have run around so fast chasing around Leon in the short course, because he ended up finishing 21st. He was doing really well early on. I think he just got stuck on a certain obstacle, but he's always a threat no matter when he shows up, and I think he'll have a great bounce back this October at OCR Worlds. But some really good competition on the men's side.
Do we know anything about those first 2 guys, their background,
no,
or are they?
Absolutely nothing. They've just run a few races, and they didn't even win the races.
It's amazing. How did the women do in the 15K?
So a lot of people, if they had to place their money, it would go on Corinne Carlson. She has always been known for her obstacle proficiency, always placing really well at OCR Worlds. I think she's podiumed a couple times there as well. And she was actually in they had a race preview video, and she basically was like, yeah, I'm expecting to win. She did not win, though. She ended up getting second. The winner was Katja Christensen from Denmark. She finished in just under 2:09, and Corinne was in 2:11. So it was a pretty solid victory for Katja Christensen. And third place was Mira Lorena Gonzalez from Spain, and she finished in 2:17. So there was about a 6-minute cushion. So I think that the longer races in these mandatory obstacle completion races, there tends to be a bigger gap between the men and women. Have you noticed that in terms of just the close finishes aren't as common at the top of the race, and it's more like if you're really, really proficient at obstacles, you can kind of run away in these contests?
Yeah, and in fact, not just that, but like we've seen Nicole Miracle do this several times where she's just 8 or 10 minutes ahead of the women, even in a shorter race. I think, especially at the top levels with the women, I think that there's always, there's just 3, 4, 5 women that are way at the top, and then there's going to be some margin between that top elite level and like the next level down.
Yeah, I almost feel as if they're a few years behind how the men have been, where at the beginning it was like Hobie, Cody, Hunter, Bracken, and everyone else, like at the beginning. And then everyone kind of, now you've got, if you burpee and you miss a spear or something, you got 10 people who can clean up that gap. You've seen it with Robert Killian not being as dominant anymore. Ryan Woods having some issues this year. I just feel like the gap is closed significantly on the men's side. And I wouldn't be surprised maybe 2021, 2022, that same exact thing happens on the women's side. I just feel like the top women athletes are just in a class of their own at the moment, and just not all of them are just amazing at obstacles, and they tend to be the best runners, and that's the perfect combo for OCR. Let's be real. And until just some new blood comes in, like a Nell Rojas earlier this year, if they stick around, it just seems like the cream of the crop women are on a completely different level than that 1B group.
Kind of like Rebecca Hammond coming in at the end of last year and this year.
Yep, absolutely. And great college runner who has a rock climbing background. So you got to have that perfect combo in order to break in. But they're out there. They just probably haven't been exposed to OCR, but it doesn't take anything away from the women who are dominating. Like they're there for a reason, and it doesn't matter how many new good ones come in, they're still going to stay at the top. I just think that the clustering of them will get a lot tighter as over the next couple of years, as more women or top women enter the sport.
Any last thoughts on the OCR European Championships before we talk Spartan?
So I think a good transition would be, what's your take on having it on the same day or same weekend?
So these are the two biggest races in all of OCR in all of Europe, and they are literally the exact same weekend.
Yep.
I don't think Spartan did it on purpose. I think Spartan just doesn't care. I think Spartan, they tend to have the attitude like, well, we are obstacle course racing, and in the U.S., that's not, they're not far from the truth. Like, if you want elite level competition, you're probably racing Spartan Race, unless you're Yuri Forrest or Ryan Woods at a Savage Race on a random weekend.
Yeah, and even Woods, or I'd go more Ken Corigliano doing
Sure.
Savage, because Woods does Spartan as well.
But over in Europe, it's a totally different ballgame. Spartan is not the only game in town. There is Toughest, and there is Strong Viking, and there is, at these races, the OCR European Championships have been there for years and years. They have a
OCR
federation.
series, yep.
They have their year. They're probably a decade ahead of the U.S. as far as the leadership of the sport, as far the legitimacy of it. And not that Spartan needs to defer or to give them first choice, but it just doesn't seem. It seems like you'd want as many of the top athletes at your race as possible. So you would think both races would go out of their way to avoid each other, but that just didn't happen.
Yeah. Now the one argument that I would give against that is, a lot of the times you can go on Spartan's website, they already have like the first 3-4 months of 2020 filled out. They know that Dallas is going to be the second or third for the Dallas Stadium. It's going to be the second or third weekend in June every single year. They know that they're going to have, to start off the season, they're going to have a Arizona Sprint sometime in February. They're always going to have some California race late in the year. Like, they've got a pretty consistent schedule with venues on a repetitive schedule. And if you look at their championship schedule, when have they ever had like a major race not be at a mountain? It's always Killington, Tahoe. It's been in Morzine, France before, and now the Dolomites in Italy. I mean, they've got there's a reason they put it, or they're very consistent in their track record for that. And I feel like the dates just that's just how it was. I don't think that they intentionally did it to try to take away competition. Because realistically, people in the open heat, they're the ones who are going to show up. I don't think that if they had their choice, they would prefer to have some of those top names like the Sergei Silin, Thibaut Debouchet, and Corinne Carlson try to come over and give the Spartan European Championships a try. It's obviously a tough choice for several of the athletes, but I feel like that's just kind of how the stars lined up. And then OCR European Championship, I think they already announced their date as well next year. So I hope there's no clash, but I mean, it just kind of seems like that's just how things lined up.
You and I both know Joe DeSena, the CEO of Spartan Race. It's not like we hang out and, go to coffee every Thursday or anything, but...
Oh, he's on my couch with me right now.
He doesn't seem like the kind of guy to shy away from a fight or some business competition.
I would agree, but I don't think that this was... I think that he's kind of taken a little less of the competition side, and he's more like brand development, as opposed to David Watson at this point, who's taken the role that Joe DI had for a while, where he's trying to attract the best athletes in the sport and make sure that the legitimacy of Spartan and OCR race, like obstacle racing, just continues. I don't think that they intentionally had that conflict. That's just my opinion. That might not be the case, but I don't think that they intentionally did that. Just because they're giving all these wild cards to people for Iceland or for Sweden for the 24-hour championship. They're looking for the best athletes for Tahoe. They're going to give some wild cards and stuff. So I don't think that they're intentionally shying away from having some of the top athletes give Spartan European Championships a shot.
You know how I think we can tell is if it happens 2 years in a row. Then then I don't think that happens on accident 2 years in a row.
That's a good point. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, let's talk about that Spartan European Championship. Who won for the men?
So if you had to pick any race in the world that is obstacle racing, who would you pick to win it?
If I had to pick one man for one obstacle course race on
doesn't matter what
day,
distance.
Yep. I would probably pick John Albon.
That is the smartest pick you can do, and he destroyed everybody. He was basically tied with Peter Szyszka for the first hour 15 of the race, and then he put a 9-minute gap on him in the second half. Like, absolutely incredible. No one touches him in terms of downhill. He just ended up winning the trail running ultra championship again. The guy's an animal. Never bet against John Albon, let's be real. And he ended up winning in just under 2:19. However, as impressive as that was, I think that was the second most impressive thing that I saw that weekend. Did you happen to catch that amazing finish for second and third?
I have never seen a finish as close as between second and third place at the Spartan European Championship race this past weekend.
That's pretty descriptive, but I have yet to see that either. But you're talking just like exciting finishes, period. I would put that on par with the Ryan Woods, Ryan Atkins, like rolling down the cargo net right before the finish and first race of this year. I would put it on par with that, just like the crazy finish towards the end.
It was so good. It was so good. The man in second place at the time, Peter Ziska, was ahead. Sergey's trying to catch up with him. He has to throw a spear. He hits his spear. He is
keep in mind. Peter is done with about 25 out of 30 burpees at this point. So he had roughly a 2-minute lead heading into the spear throw, which is 100 feet from the finish line. All they have is a basic rig after that, just for context.
And so Sergey he hits his spear. He's running up, trying to catch up with Peter. By the time Sergey has Peter in his sights, Peter's halfway across the rig.
Yeah, he's probably done with 4 or 5 rings at that point, just about to go onto the horizontal bar.
So Peter's still in front of Sergey when Sergey starts the rig. I have never seen anyone finish the rig as fast as Sergey flew across that rig and passed Peter to take second place from him.
I'm pretty sure he's like literally an orangutan. He just swung, and it's so difficult to describe. You should post a link to the video when you upload this. Incredible. Just go and look on Sergey Pereligin on his Instagram page. Got a great recap video. It's got some great music in there also to set the mood. And let me tell you, that finish was just amazing. Just closed the gap. And then once he got off it, he was like Usain Bolt sprinting towards the finish line for those next 5-10 seconds. It was incredible. I've never seen a finish like that just before the finish line in a major championship race like that. I loved it.
It was amazing. Amazing finish.
Yep. And that doesn't obviously John Albin winning by 9 minutes. Let's be real. He was the real star of the show.
John Albin's listening like, hey guys, I was already like chilling I had ice on my knees by then. What are you doing?
Yeah. John's heart rate was like below 50 at that point. And once again, we're not giving him the full respect that he should get. John Albin is the best OCR racer in the world, probably tied with Lindsey Webster. Let's be real. But it was a great race. So they had the top three, pretty solid gap. And then between fourth place and 10th place, there was like roughly a minute between people, but it was, if you pay attention to the European scene, Thibault Jean, Sebastian Conrad Hackinson, Jeremy Gachet, who's been tearing up the scene in France all year, Peter Saniga, he's the Slovakian racer. He's had some pretty solid finishes as well. And then a surprising finish in 8th place was Albert Soler. He's had some really good performances. I think he won like 17 of his first 18 races all time, and he was about top 12 or so at Tahoe, top 12 or 14 last year. Very, very solid racer. He's great on the trails, but he must have missed a spear or something, or not a spear. He must have had to do burpees early on because normally he's just pushing the pace. But speaking of pushing the pace, Peter Schischke, he ended up going out crazy fast in the race. And I know we've had this discussion before. Are you of the same belief where you can only make up so much ground on climbing, but if you're dead for the descending, you're screwed, and you'll always lose to someone who can descend better than you? It's very rare that you'll be able to outclimb someone who can outdescend. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, you can make up more time going downhill than uphill.
Okay. Yeah. So John Albin clearly had an amazing descent. Peter had like a minute and a half lead or so, like 50 minutes into the race. And I mean, that's just not smart at that point, to be honest. Clearly a fantastic racer. He's got the most all-time podiums, most all-time individual wins in Spartan history. The guy's legit. He's had 7th place at Tahoe before, but I think he probably knew that he wasn't going to be able to outdescend John Albin, so that's maybe why he went out so hard. But I just don't think that that's the best strategy to try to win it on the uphill at the beginning. Robert Killian did that last year. He had a pretty good lead on the first climb at Tahoe, probably minute and a half. And then Atkins and Albin just ate him up on the downhill later in the race. And I feel like that's kind of the way that the sport's going. If you can descend really well, you're gonna most likely place better than the top descenders or top climbers. And just take a look at just basically every other championship race or major race. Johnny Luna Lima crushing the field at Big Bear, amazing descender. And I don't know if did you ever hear that Mount Marathon race in Alaska? Just quick tangent.
Yes, love that race.
Okay, so
Taylor Novakovic's.
Yeah. Well, he gets a lot of notoriety for it, but Taylor Turney, he got 18th at Tahoe last year. Taylor, we were talking about descending. I would argue that Taylor Turney is a better descender than Johnny Lima and John Albin, as ridiculous as that sounds. He was like the 3rd or 4th best descender last year, but he's been just working on it like crazy, getting even better. He ended up descending Mount Marathon 1 second off the all-time record, like ever. He descended in the same exact race over a minute and a half quicker than Max King in the same race. Like, that's incredible. Kilian Jornet, who's universally known as probably the best descender in any trail running, in the running community, he ended up having a 30-second faster descent than Kilian Jornet. Like, that's how good Taylor is at descending. And he worked his way up from like 30th or so, all the way to 18th. He passed like 12 really, really good climbers on the descent in just about 10 minutes at Mount Marathon. So just goes to show you another example of a race where if you can descend well, you're really going to make up a ton of ground, and most of the time you're going to place better than being the great ascender only.
That Mount Marathon race doesn't get as much attention as races like the Barclays or World's Toughest Mudder, because it's a 5K race, but it is basically straight up a mountain and straight down. Like you are on your hands and knees climbing up, and then you're basically a controlled fall climbing down, like falling down.
There are 2 rules. You have to start at the bottom, and you have to turn around at a certain rock at the top, and then get back to the finish line. You can make your own path. Obviously, they have a designated trail that a lot of people have used through the years, but some people just say, screw it, I'm making my own path. And half the time, a lot of them end up wiping out. Most of the top guys and women, they'll end up wearing gloves because they're going to wipe out. I know that on the women's race for that, there was a couple, I think top 2 or 3, they had a wipeout, and that did not look pretty. But it's unbelievable, like 50 to 60% downhill grade. You're basically falling off a cliff at that point, and it's all loose shale. It all dust kicking up. It looked incredible. So I props off to Taylor for doing that, and anybody who can really descend that crazy. That's just amazing. But I imagine if they had a Spartan race on that would would be brutal.
Yeah, that race should get more love from the general community, I think. Hey, let's talk. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it doesn't because it has a lottery system.
It's hard to get in. You're right. It's hard to get in.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the women at the Spartan European Championships.
Oh, yeah. So Myriam Guillaume-Boisset, she has had an unreal season so far. Not too many people pay attention to the European scene if they are based in the U.S., but I'm telling you, if I could put my money on any woman to win the $1 million for the Sweden 24-hour championship, I would pick Myriam over any other OCR racer on the planet.
Over Lindsay Webster.
Tell
me why.
Myriam has basically been doing what Nicole Miracle did the first couple of races of the year, like winning by 10, 15 minutes. Or Nicole was winning by like 7 and 4. Myriam just won the European Championship by 11 minutes. Granted, it's not at the same level of competition, beating Nicole or Alyssa or Rhea or Faye, any of the top U.S. women. Regardless, she's just been incredible. Myriam is basically a burpee machine. About 2 or 3 years ago, I remember writing an article, and she ended up doing 300 burpees at Tahoe and finished 8th place. That I can't even imagine. How is that even possible? Like, doing 300 burpees, just period, like, here's your workout, do 300 burpees, your quads are going to be so blown up, and never mind, like, having to ascend and descend 5,000 feet and deal with all the elements there. Like, that's just incredible. So I think that if she were to get her obstacle game down and not have to do so many burpees, I really think that she has a chance of second place at Tahoe. I don't think anyone's beating Lindsay, but realistically, I would put Myriam as a podium. Like, I would put her on my podium pick right now for Tahoe.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and she actually ended up missing the spear, just like we went over for the men's race, just before the finish line. So they actually have her on video. What would you say it takes the average person to do? Let's say you've just done a race where you climb 5,200 feet and then descend 5,200 feet, and you're on like your 3rd set of burpees of the day. You're just about to finish. How long do you think it's going to take the average person to do 30 burpees?
You're doing 30 burpees. What's the rule of thumb? 2 minutes? Minute and a half?
Minute and a half is flying. I would say most people at that point are taking 3.5 to 4 seconds per burpee. So yeah, like 150 to 2 minutes at that point in a race. I timed her. She did it in a minute 26. That's flying. Like it's not quite like Isaiah territory in terms of how quick he does burpees, but I don't think that you're going to find like 10 people all race, male or female, who are doing burpees that quickly. She is just a burpee machine, and I just, if she could get her obstacle game down, I don't see any way that anybody's besides Lindsay, maybe Nicole, will be able to beat her, especially with Susanna not going to be racing this year since she's having a child. But Myriam is unbelievable.
Let's talk about the rest of the podium. Behind Miriam was Janka Popova.
Or Yanka Popova.
Yanka, I apologize.
Yeah, so I think it's actually Pepova, but I don't know where the accent part is, but I know it's
Yanka. I'm the worst. I apologize.
Yeah, yeah. But you got to work on your Slovakian accent. But she ended up winning the Iceland 24-hour on the women's side last year. So clearly legit. She actually beat Nicole and Zuzana in one of the Sparta trifecta. I think it was the sprint. So she's had a couple of impressive finishes to date already beforehand, and obviously second at the European Championship this year. That's just keeps adding to her resume. Really impressive. Third place was Elisa Petrova, and she's a Russian racer. She was 20th last year, so that's a really, really solid improvement for her. And fourth place is another name that I think should be on people's radar, Jezebel Kramer. She is a French racer. She only did 2 races in 2017 and then 1 in 2018. And this year, I have her ranked roughly the 9th or 10th best woman racer worldwide. She has just been on a roll. She's been super close to Miriam in a lot of races, and she's beaten Yanka. I think they're 3-3 head to head. She actually beat Yanka the following weekend, so this past weekend in Morzine. So she's had some great finishes. She got second in one of like the French National Series events, and she has a few other wins this year. But she's a really, really strong trail runner from some of the clips I've seen, and definitely someone to watch, especially if she makes it to Tahoe. She could be a top 10, top 15 threat for sure. And then Ona Sociat, she's a Spanish racer. She was in 5th place, and she's had some several podium finishes this year as well. So really, these names might not be as familiar to the U.S. racers as on the men's side, but there are some pretty serious talent on the women's side, especially Miriam. I'm telling you, I would really put her as a podium pick right now if I had to make out my Tahoe bracket.
For Tahoe. I didn't notice this on the men's side, but I'm looking at the ages of the top 6 women. They're not, like 22-year-olds, like, fresh out of college, like you'd imagine. 40, 34, 4th place is 39, 6th place 36. Like these are women with some mileage under their belts and some cardio built up over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alban, 30's not old. I'm going to be that in a couple months, so it better not be old. But Jeremy Gaucher, he's been tearing up the scene on the men's side, and he's 41. Thomas Satinsky, he is on the men's side also, and he's a Czech racer. He's 35 years old. Eugenio Bianchi, he's 34. Like a lot of the European racers, that same deal. They're like early to mid 30s. It gives a lot of hope to the people in their like late 20s that there's still time to keep improving and make a name for yourself in the sport.
Yeah, and especially when you get into these multi-hour, 3-hour races that takes the mental quality that age can help provide also.
Exactly. Yeah, you're a smarter racer at that point. You might lose just a little bit of fitness, but you've got all that experience, and that really does make a difference in the long run. So
let's
go.
You go. Well, I was going to say, before we wrap up, anything else on the European Championships before we talk about this weekend in the U.S.?
I feel like same deal with the common issue with the U.S. It's always on a mountain. It's a ton of ascent, ton of descent. It's not really like the rest of the season, but that just kind of seems like the way the Spartan Championship courses are regardless. So I don't think there's any way around it, no matter where you are in the world. I know that the APAC Championship, the Asian Pacific, they're going to be on a ski resort in China also later this year. So pretty much if you want to be a championship level racer in Spartan, you don't have any choice except to be on a ski resort. That's just how they've been, and I feel like that's how it's always going to be.
Do you think it's a bad thing, or do you think it's just
it's not something reflective of the rest of the year? And I feel like this is an argument that gets beaten to death, but pick a super, pick something with rolling hills. That's more the middle ground. That's the way that I see it. An obstacle, then super.
What do you think about the elevation they have at Tahoe every year?
I live at 6,100 feet, so I don't mind it. I'm not going again this year, but I feel like it definitely makes an impact to those not at elevation. And I'm sure the same thing with over in Italy in the Dolomites or the French Alps. Those are some serious mountains. If you watch the coverage, actually, just one last thing on the coverage. So I know there's a lot of complaints among U.S. fans about the live coverage, go and watch the European coverage if you want to appreciate what we have in the U.S. That's all I'm saying. Actually, on the male announcer, David Dietrich, I thought he did a really good job providing input. The other announcer, not so much, and he kind of did the best to tolerate her lack of knowledge on the sport. I don't know why they'd have someone who clearly didn't know much about obstacle racing, period, why should be the commentator for the championship race for all of Europe, but that's their decision. But anyway, they about 2 hours into the race, they ended up David Watson just came in and kind of saved the day on the broadcast, and he ended up staying with David Dietrich and doing actually a really, really good job. I think that they had a great combo, and I think that it would be pretty interesting. I think David Watson's he's obviously very involved, and I don't know how his time would be best spent at Tahoe. I know that he did some announcing last year, but I think that it would be very interesting picking someone like a David Magida or, Kevin Donahue, someone who's clearly passionate about the sport and knows the ins and outs about it on the U.S. side, but also having someone who has a really good grasp on the English language like David, but also can give a lot of insight on the European side. I think that he'd be a really good addition to to add some flavor to the Tahoe broadcast for sure. So I'm just giving him a little shout out, and I think that if anyone's listening on the Spartan side, definitely he'd be a good addition for sure.
Let's talk about this weekend. This is a busy race weekend here in the U.S.
Yeah, not just the U.S. In Canada, they're going to be having you want to talk about busy. Some people are crazy enough to do this. They're having an Ultra Beast, Super, and Sprint on the same weekend in Kimberley. Crazy mountain terrain. Last year, like the Beast was won in like 3.5 hours. People were barely walking at the end of it, and a lot of the top racers were saying that it was one of the most brutal courses of all time. I couldn't even imagine why some people would want to go and do 3 out of the 4 or even all 4 races. That's just crazy to me why you'd put your body through that, but some people do it. But that's going to be a really cool weekend in Canada. In the U.S., we're going to have Palmerton. I know that it doesn't have that status anymore as one of the U.S. National Series races, but anybody who's been a fan of the sport through the years knows Palmerton. Just with that, it has that notorious double sandbag, has some really steep hills. People don't usually think of Pennsylvania as crazy terrain, but apparently it's just one of the most brutal courses out there. Especially being in the summer, that heat also will add a different element to the course as well. And then Fort Carson in Colorado, I'm actually going to be there, and for a normal everyday weekend race, it's going to have some solid competition. Robert Killian lives here as well. Tyler Veerman, Ryan Kent, Isaiah, Matt Kempson, Cole Schwartz, Forrest Bogue is coming down. Wouldn't be surprised if Johnny Luna Lima comes down. Like for a regular standard race, I mean, this could have 10 to 12 really, really talented races on the men's side. I know Nicole Miracle did it. Sarah Woodward, who never gets enough respect on the women's side, she's finished like top 10 several times at Tahoe or Spartan World Championship. Never gets any respect from the community, despite just being an absolute animal in the mountains. She's been here the past couple of years, and then Alex Walker's flying in from Texas, so they're going to have some good competition all around. So I think that it's going to have some really interesting finishes, some tight battles for sure. And then in the UK, they're also having, in the Midlands, they're having one of their UK and Ireland regional series races as well. So it's a lot of racing this weekend. That's just on that's just the Spartan side. And then Savage race, they're going to have Spartan, or they're going to have Savage in, they call it Boston, but I've been to that venue before. It's like an hour west of Boston, just like most stupid things when they're like, oh yeah, it's Dallas, but it's really like an hour and a half away from it. So that'll be a good battle. I'm sure Air Force Ken. I think Benny Gifford is actually going to be there, so that'll be interesting to see how he does against some of the top names. Maybe Ryan Kempson will end up doing it since he's from Massachusetts, and you never know if Yuri will show up, and he's pretty much a lock to win also. And then wasn't there a toughest Minnesota?
There is. Toughest Mudder, the third toughest Mudder of the year will be this weekend also. It's real different with no prize money for the toughest Mudders this year, that we don't know who the elites are that are going to come. Evan Perperis and Aaron Rost won it, the toughest East last month. Aaron will not be there. I haven't talked with Evan yet. I'm not sure if he's going to be racing this one, but actually he will be. I've seen him posting about his blog mets, so he'll be a pick to be on the podium for sure. But that's this weekend.
I mean, at this point, it's just really difficult if you don't know who's going to be there with any confidence, it's kind of hard to pick a lot of Tough Mudder events these days.
At the end of this year, Spartan will have their 24-hour Ultra Championship again. And again, like last year, there's a chance for one man and one woman to win or to split $1 million. But they've changed the requirements this year. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So last year, basically, Albin, he gave up halfway through because it was like he wasn't going to hit 100 miles after winning Lake Tahoe and the Trifecta World Championship in Sparta, Greece last year. It was basically impossible for a woman to reach 100 miles. Considering Ryan Atkins ran like 85, no one was going to reach 100 last year. This year, they tried to make it a little bit more attainable. They ended up changing the prize structure, so it's kind of points based. So if you take the number of miles that you run in Iceland minus your individual placement or average placement for the Tahoe World Championship for Spartan and the Trifecta World Championship for Spartan. So say that you finish like second, first, and third in Greece, but you end up having like the highest overall finish, like the lowest average placement. You'll end up getting 1 point for that. And then if you win Tahoe, you get 1 point. So if you run 100 miles in Sweden, which is the new venue this year for 100, you'll do 100 minus 1 for each of those places. And that will get you 98 points. If you do that, you end up winning $1 million. On the women's side, same idea, but instead of 100, it's 80 minus that. So if you end up getting 78 points on the women's side, you'll end up getting $1 million. However, I'm pretty sure most of us agree that that's very unlikely. They're not going to just give away $1 million, even though Joe kind of claims like he's going to do that. If no one reaches the $1 million, all other payouts double, which is pretty cool for the other athletes. However, if you get 97 on the men's side, for example, or 77 on the women's, you go from 25,000 to 50,000. But you're 1 mile away from $1 million, so that's like a huge drop off. I mean, obviously, for them to give away potentially that much prize money is ridiculous to begin with. But last year, Ryan Atkins, he got 83 miles. He got second at Lake Tahoe for the World Championship. And then let's just say he would have got second to John Albin in the Trifecta, just as an example.
Right.
So 83, I think that was his total. 83 minus 2. So he's got 79. If you do anywhere from 70 to 89 miles, you win $1,500. That's it. Like that, I don't know. I think they're making a ton of for obvious reasons. They're doing a lot of publicity about winning $1 million, but Ryan Atkins probably only would have won $1,500. That's kind of crap for a major race like that. For the potential winning to the huge drop off for being the best racer in that, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that. What's your thoughts?
I can appreciate how they changed the structure. Essentially, for the men, it really hasn't changed. If you run 100 miles in Iceland, and if you finished first in Tahoe and first at the Trifecta, you'd have 98 points. That's $1 million, right? Now, let's say you don't finish first in Tahoe, so you finish second. You're not out of it. You just have to run 101 miles or whatever to get. You still need to get 98 points, right?
Yep. It's points, not miles, that matter. So you could, in theory, get like second place at the other two, and then do like 104 miles or 102 miles and end up getting 98 points, and that would justify it. But that would be an unbelievable increase over last year's performance to be able to get that mileage.
But for the women, it's actually, I don't want to say it's achievable, but it's 20 miles, essentially, 20 miles less at Sweden than you would have needed last year. So now, can Lindsay do that? Can Miriam do that?
I would still put my money on Miriam over Lindsay. Just as ridiculous as that sounds, I think that if for this particular race, like Miriam, she just won an Ultra Beast in Morzine a week after winning the European Spartan Championship. The Morzine was basically the same deal, where it was like 5,000 feet elevation gain. The next morning, she ended up winning the Beast, which was over 3 hours. And then the day after that, she ended up winning the Super. Like, her endurance, and she comes from a multi-day adventure race background.
Right.
So I feel like just if she can get her obstacle game down and doesn't, just become victim to the cold, I really feel like she would have the best chance on the women's side. especially given that they don't need to reach 100. It's pretty much 80. She'll have to get a little over 80 because I don't think that she'll end up winning, the Greek trifecta championship or Tahoe. So she'll need a couple extra points or a couple extra miles for that security there. But I don't know. I feel like the women have a much better shot of making this happen than men.
And also the loops at Sweden, they're not going to be like a perfect 5 mile loop like we're used to talking about for World's Toughest Mudder. It's like 6 and change usually. What
do you think would happen? Say that like it's let's say it was exactly 5 mile loops. So Atkins, he wins Tahoe, he wins Greece, the Sparta trifecta. And so he's at like lap 19 going on to 20. He doesn't finish it, but he gets 0.6 or 60% of the way through. So he reaches that 96 miles or whatever, and then or 100. Whatever his mileage would be. Would they give him credit for a partial lap, do you think?
Well, I know at World's Toughest Mudder you would not. You either get 5 miles or you get 0 miles. So
they're gonna make it so like 98. That in theory, like divided by 7, that would be 14 laps. They'll probably make it like a 7.1 mile loop, just so you have to go in that 15th loop for that extra tiny bit of mile. They're gonna do something like that.
We've seen Lindsay at World's Toughest Mudder several times, and she's been open about it, that the 24 hours is not her favorite distance. You know who I would like to see on the women's side take a crack at it? Rhea Coble, absolutely.
Yeah, she would be I'd actually put Miriam and Rhea basically tied. Maybe Rhea actually above because she's proven herself at the 100 distance, but I still like them both more than Lindsay in this particular type of style.
That'd be good. I haven't talked with Rhea about this race. I don't know if she's planning on competing for the $1 million or not, but I think she...
she already ran the New Jersey Ultra Beast, so she could qualify.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and that's why Miriam just did the... actually, now that I think about it, Lindsay only did the Beast that day, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Rhea, you remember last year, I think you're alluding to, Rhea couldn't run the Ultra last year was it in the race last year? She couldn't run it last year because she didn't qualify, so she ended up just kind of hanging out there for the weekend.
That's why she ended up doing it I think it was like late April when she ended up doing the New Jersey race. And then so what do you think John Albon would do? Say he's in the same predicament again.
I think John Albon, he seems like he doesn't need the money, but he likes the challenge. And I think he'd go for it again. I think he'll do, I think he got kind of a bad taste in his mouth at the end of last year. I don't think he felt he was dealt with squarely.
Making him fly to Malaysia a week before just to do that was crap. Like, come on, you're literally the ultra trail running world champion, and you don't think that, and you have to qualify and prove yourself that you're an ultra Spartan runner. Come on, that's just garbage. And I mean, anyone who's run over 100 miles of World's Toughest, like that, I think that's just garbage. And they were basically giving out free entries to everybody else just to show up, and they make him fly to Malaysia to do that race just to qualify. I would definitely have a sour taste in my mouth as well.
Now, just to give you the other side of it, $1 million is a lot of money, and Joe's not going to make it easy on anybody. Rhea Coble, John Albon, Ryan Atkins, anyone who's going to go for it. So, and
they shouldn't. I mean, it's $1 million. Like, what? Who in their right? What kind of business model? Like Battle Frog might do that, but. I don't know, but I think Albon. I saw on Obstacle Racing Media that he had some interview and he was like, "Let's see how Tahoe goes first," or something along those lines. So we'll see. He's probably kind of playing it by ear, but I know that there was some chatter on Discord, on the OCR Discord, and that people were saying that there are only like 4 races that are even feasible after because I think Sweden is like early November, so it's definitely earlier this year versus last year, so there are fewer qualification attempts, and I think there's only a week or two between Spartan Greece Trifecta World Championships and then the 24 hours, so you're going to have to run a beast, a super, and a sprint same weekend, and then recover for a 24-hour race the week after. Like, I don't know, it just seems very unattainable.
I don't think John's going to go out of his way to qualify. I think if it happens, great for John. Now John is obviously the best in the world, right? Best in the world. But I would
say Atkins would be the best in the world for this type of competition. But in an overall perspective, I think that John is the best in the world.
You know what? This is another whole topic entirely. I'm very upset that we never got the John Albon versus Ryan Atkins race that we wanted at World's Toughest Mudder.
And it won't happen until they bring money back.
Hopefully 2020. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, so real quick, if you had to make a bet right now, what do you think the winner in the total points at the end of all this stuff will be on the men and women's side right now?
Okay, for Tahoe, for Greece, and for the Ultra Championship.
Yeah, you don't have to say like I think Atkins is going to get second at Tahoe again, and he'll win the trifecta and get this. Like, how many points do you think they'll end up with, and who do you think the person will be? That's it.
I think if Albin wins Tahoe, he'll go to Greece again. I think if he doesn't win it or place second, I'm thinking this out loud. If he doesn't get at least second, he's not going to race Greece. I think if Atkins wins Tahoe, he'll do Greece.
You don't think Atkins will do it anyway?
Well, if he finishes second, now Atkins has had some not bad, but like off the podium performances at Tahoe before.
He's had one. He's had fourth place, won several seconds. I mean,
he's never won Tahoe.
No, but he's been like on the last rig multiple times.
Do you think this is his year? Let's say this is his year.
But John, I think John, until John loses, it's tough to bet against him. I picked Atkins to win last year, but when you think about it, Albin hasn't lost OCR Worlds since it's been around since 2014. He keeps winning all these pure running world championship. The way that all these mountain courses are, it basically suits his skill set perfectly. And you want to know what's even crazier? I looked on his Strava. Do you want to know who had the fastest carries on like the chain carry, the bucket carry, sandbag carry? John Albin on every single carry in the Dolomites for the Spartan European Championship. No one was even near him to push him, and he still had the fastest carry on everything. And he was obviously the best ascender. Like, how do you beat that?
You know what? I'm not taking anything away from John Albin. Tahoe is a weird race. Like, Cody Moat will come out of nowhere and win. Hobie Call will win it. We haven't heard from him in a year.
Man, I cannot wait until our upcoming podcast when we're going to give our Utah preview. Like, that is going to be madness if the two of them show up, and I don't even know if they will. So they're both from Utah, but they could. But let's save it till later. But that's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, so there could be some guy, not a guy we've never heard of, but someone we're not expecting at all could win Tahoe. Someone who has no intention of going to Sweden, no intention of going to Greece, and kind of muck it up for everybody else. So as far as total points, man, I don't know. I don't think anyone's going to get 98 points. I think it'll be,
Do you think it'll be over 90?
Man, I want to say high 80s, low, maybe 90, maybe 91.
And who's it going to be?
Ryan Atkins.
So Ryan Atkins,
because he's going to put the most mileage. He will win Sweden. Ryan Atkins will win Sweden.
Yeah,
so
he had enough to do another lap, but it wasn't worth it at that point, from all accounts from last year. And I would also pick him to be the winner for the highest point total in this type of system prize payout system. I would put him at 90 to 95. They're going to make it basically impossible to make 100. And then I would guess he will have fewer than 5 points for the total from Tahoe and the Trifecta Championship. I'll put him at low 90s, like 90 to 92.
I agree with you that low. So his plate. You're saying his places with Tahoe and Greece would be combined, like a second and a third, something like that.
Mileage roughly 95, and then -5 for his other placements. So he'll end up
points,
like 90 to 92 or so. That's my guess.
Yeah, I'd say that. 89 to 91. I agree with that. What about the women?
I know I talked a big game about Miriam earlier, but now that I think about it, this is Rhea. If it has her name written all over it, just think of the mileage that she's done compared to the winning men. The difference in mileage is basically 80 versus 100. So the women need to get 80% of the men realistically in this. She's had 90% of the men's total from World's Toughest Mudder multiple times. Totally attainable for her. The problem with her is, can she take down Nicole, Lindsay, Miriam, some of the other top racers in either the Trifecta Championship or Tahoe? She's consistently around that 3 to 5 range. I don't see anybody beating Lindsay at Tahoe. So basically that's an extra point that you're going to have to overcome. And then Trifecta World Championship, Nicole went last year. Zuzana will not be there, but I just feel like she's going to need to get 85 miles in Sweden to overcome some of the other points. Not that she's a bad racer by any means. I just think that it's going to be a little more difficult due to the negative points that you're going to have to overcome. But I think that she'll be able to offset a lot of that in terms of the actual mileage that she's able to run. I wouldn't be surprised if she's like 74 to 76.
If she can keep her points from Tahoe and Greece at like 4, maybe 5, then she's got a shot.
She does that, and she can run 80 miles. 80 to 85 miles. It would be crazy. But this is all totally dependent on how the lap structure is. If they end up having some odd random number lap where it's going to like be right at that threshold where you're going to have to do another lap just to hit that tiny little extra mileage that you barely missed, that's when it's going to get really difficult. But we'll see.
But you know what? Ryan and Rhea both have multiple World's Toughest Mudder. They've done this before. It's not new to them. They've been out there for 24 hours. If anyone can do it, it's those two.
Yeah, and it's not new to Miriam either in terms of actual like racing. I don't know about how she'd hold up in OCR, but she's got a great recovery and she just keeps grinding. And she's a burpee machine. And I know that in the 24-hour Spartans historically, it's basically you do all your burpees at once and then you do them in the tent or the rest area, and then you go on your way at the end of the lap. I mean, she can crank out burpees with the best athletes on the planet for OCR. So I really she's a dark horse for a lot of these major late championship races for me.
That'll be fun to watch.
Yep.
Jack, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
The only other one that I would really like to bring up was the Dallas Stadium Race, and
you were there.
Did you end up seeing how that went?
You tell me about it. You were there. You ran it.
Yeah. So that was arguably like the most exciting, just painful race I've done in a long, long time. On the men's side, you had Robert Killian and Ryan Kent. I just real quick, you saw the new Ram burpees that people have to do in stadium races?
They're a burpee holding it's called a Ram. It's basically a weighted tube.
Yep. Yes. So the men, it's 55 pounds. The women, it's 33. Just think of you have 2 paper towel rolls like stacked on each other, and that's about the size of it. Doesn't seem heavy. I mean, 55-pound dumbbell snatch isn't bad at all. But having to do 15 burpees at the end of a race in a stadium race where you've already climbed almost 2,000 feet and you're redlining the whole time, and there's an obstacle grip gauntlet right at the end, that produced one of the craziest finishes that I've ever seen, especially in like the highlights. That Robert Killian and Ryan Kent basically reached. I think Robert reached the Ram burpees. You have to do 15 of them. He reached it a couple seconds before Ryan Kent, and then it was maybe 50 feet to the finish line. You had rings, just only rings because it's a stadium race and they always make it easy for some reason. And it was just whoever could finish those 15 burpees first and get across the rings, and then the finish line was right there. And Ryan Kent ended up finishing about 1.5 reps before Robert Killian. They were just neck and neck, and the cameras were on them. The announcer guy was just screaming in the background, and Ryan barely edged him at the end. Super close finish. It was like 6 or 7 seconds. A few minutes later, and they ended up beating Bracken by like 2.5 minutes, which if that's really hard to fathom. Bracken losing without doing any burpees by 2.5 minutes in a stadium race. That just shows you the level that Ryan Kent and Robert Killian were pushing each other during the race. Later in the race, a couple minutes later, you had Matt Kempson, Isaiah Vidal, and Cole Schwartz all at the same exact scenario. It was just Matt Kempson got to the Ram burpees maybe 5 seconds after Cole and Isaiah, and all 3 of them finished within like 1 second of each other. They got on the rings at the same exact time, and Matt Kempson ended up swinging, going for the bell, but he just mistimed it, and he had to go for another backswing. And while he was doing that, just because he came up just short, Isaiah hit the bell, sprinted through the finish, barely edged him, and then Matt out-sprinted Cole just for the finish right there. So those 3 those 3 were separated by like 6 or 7 seconds again, a couple minutes after Ryan Kent and Robert Killian, and maybe 30 seconds after Bracken. Right after that, Victor Quesada, who started in the second heat because they send off the first heat in groups of 15 in stadium, or every group in 15 for stadium races. Victor Quesada, who no one saw coming, ended up, without realizing it, finishing 2 seconds faster than Isaiah, bumping him from 4th to 5th place. And you know how important in the new point series getting 4th is versus 5th. It's a 24-point drop. You go from 216 to 192. As a result of that, and Bracken finishing third. Bracken had a 72-point swing in the point series, and now because of this, he's able, if he beats Isaiah by just one place in the final 2 races in Fenway and San Francisco for the Giants, if Bracken ends up winning, he can now be the stadium champion over Isaiah just because of that 2-second swing where no one saw it coming. And then shortly after that, Benny, he ended up pulling a Sergey from OCR European, or the Spartan European Championship, where he just came flying by me on the rings just at the end, didn't see him coming, thought I had the win over him, and he ended up beating me by a few seconds. And I was like, you serious? So if you look at the top 10 places, it was like 8 or 9 out of the 10 were separated by less than like 8 or 9 seconds. Unbelievable on the men's side.
Benny Gifford beat you?
Yeah, we're not going to get into that. No, so Benny is leading me in our head-to-head little bet by 2 points, but kind of the same thing with Bracken. All I have to do is beat him in the end, and I will, or in the last 2 races, and I will end up winning our bet. And realistically, I should have beat Benny. I missed my spear and got sent the wrong way, but I made up a ton of ground, thought I had the win over him, and then he had an unreal finish at the end, so props to him for taking advantage of me coasting it at the end when I thought I had an easy win over him. But definitely regret that easy finish on my end, because now it makes it a little harder with our bet.
If he ends up beating you, do we have to have him on the show?
Oh yeah, that's fine. You should have him on anyway. But and if when I end up beating him in the overall series, he has to give Nicole Miracle's new van a bath in a bikini, and nice sudsy bubble bath. So hopefully, I don't know if you want me to win or not, just to see that, but we'll see.
Benny would do that anyway.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, he's probably already done it, and he's just retroactively going to record it. But on the women's side, you had another super close finish as well. Corinna Coffin, who is back on the scene, she just won in Arizona the week before, and then she ended up winning in Dallas. Like, it's great to see her back in the OCR scene. And then you had Orla just finish she ended up getting 3rd place. She fell off the the rings right at the end, right after those Ram burpees. And I'm telling you, those Ram burpees they're going to be such a game changer, because they've affected so many placements so far. But I mean, you haven't attempted any yet, have you?
I have not.
Okay.
I don't have a Ram.
Yeah, I really hope that they end up getting in there. But a lot of people picked Orla to win, but she ended up getting 3rd that race. And so I don't know. It's just been a ton of really good action in the stadium races, and just the whole top 10 was just full of really good finishes. Unfortunately, Cassandra Ohlman, she broke her foot mid-race, and she ended up finishing 9th place. She only finished because she thinks that it can heal by November, so that she can end up racing in Fenway and San Francisco. But she was worried about getting 0 points for if you don't finish a race, now that they have the no drop policy.
Sure.
So that's kind of a bummer that she had to finish a race just to preserve points. And really, I don't know, gutsy or stupid to finish at that point, but really impressive performance. But Cody Mezebich, she was the 2nd place finisher who ended up edging Orla on the rings at the end. And then Faye Morgan, it was her birthday, she ended up getting 4th. So really, really strong finish as well. But I don't know. I guess the last thing that I was just going to mention on that topic is a lot of people, Matt Kempson, he made a post about how he was just really disappointed that Spartan gave like no attention to the race at all, despite all the close finishes. And if you look through the years and just this season alone, like everyone was super pumped about that Ryan Woods versus Ryan Atkins close finish on the cargo net to start off the year in Jacksonville. And like there were several of those finishes in Dallas, but no one paid attention to it. And it's not like they were nobodies. It's Ryan Kent and Robert Killian, Isaiah Vidal. Like you've got some of the cover boys like Corinna Coffin, like really, really familiar names on the scene. And there was just no attention given to it. And it's just a shame, because they did a really good job covering the stadium race last year for Dallas. They had a really good production value. Kevin Gelati and Ian Adamson, they ended up announcing it, but they had the guys with the GoPros following us around and stuff, and it was just really, really good coverage. But stadiums, they already have all the infrastructure in place. Like you've got the big screen in the middle. You have a very small footprint in terms of like, instead of going 6 miles in the woods, you're literally in the stadium. That's all you can go. And you've got all the bathroom facilities nearby. You've got all the all stadiums are near an airport because they're in major metro areas. And it's just a bummer that they just don't get the attention, because I ran the numbers on the men's side. They're the only races that are harder, or that have been deeper on the men's side this year, have been the big four, with Big Bear, Alabama, Jacksonville, and I forget the other U.S. Series one so far, but Seattle. And it was the same exact thing on the women's side. Like, stadium races are the next most competitive races out there, but they never get any love, despite the fact that some really, really good talent shows up to them. So I just think that a lot of people were disappointed that there wasn't much attention shown, and I think it would have been really entertaining for a lot of the fans to see that. But I'm not sure on your take on that.
Here's my take on that is I saw the Titan Games with The Rock pop up on my Hulu recommendations.
You're going to compare the Titan Games to the Spartan?
Stop. Here's my point. I've been watching $1 Million Mile on CBS. And other than American Ninja Warrior, there was Broken Skull Ranch for years and years. Other than American Ninja Warrior, OCR has not really stuck on TV. Like, Titan Games is not good. The $1 Million Mile is the only one that I really enjoy watching, and that's because I think I know a lot of the athletes. But all these OCR shows that aren't really good, they come and they get canceled after a year or two. The Spartan Team Challenge show lasted 2 years. Yep. I really wish that they would take that money and production time, that 30 minutes a week or whatever, 60 minutes a week, and put it toward a stadium race series, like six different races or 9 different races, something like. I think that's an actual race. They can add the the backstories or the sob stories too if they want, like kind of like Ninja Warrior does. But I think as far as the quality of the race, that's much better than the Broken Skull Ranch OCR stuff, or even the $1 Million Mile stuff. Like, it's not a real race. It's made for TV. Like, I think the stadium races would create much better, they would slide so much better into ESPN or Fox Sports or something like that than the Titan Games or something similar.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they already butchered TMX with how they showed that on TV for a short course True Race, where they could fit the entire race within a commercial break. But they kind of had their own agenda on, like, having the backstory and all that. I understand a lot of people want it for that, but you don't see, like, oh, here's the Padres game. Let's do this 5-minute background story on Eric Hosmer right now. Like, they don't do that. So in genuine sports, they might show like a quick little clip on some NFL game on Sunday of just some charity work that some guy did, but they don't do the whole story. It's more like, here's the action, we're going to talk over it and mention it, but just show us the action. Like, I don't care if you're watching the Olympics for some reason, or for example, it doesn't matter if it's swimming, skiing, running, track, anything. If you have a head-to-head race, doesn't matter the athletic ability level. Like, you're obviously going to have great athletes at a level like that, but it doesn't matter if it's the slow heat, the fast heat, like the qualifiers, whatever, for an Olympic level event like that. People want to see close competition and just like just look at the tactics throughout the race. They want to see how it develops over the course of the race, who burns out because they went out too hard, too fast, or too soon. And, just amazing finishes, like some of the stuff that they didn't show at Dallas because there was no coverage on it. Like, I just think that racing, people watch the Olympics in huge numbers every 2 to 4 years, whether it's the winter or summer or both, because they want to see tight finishes. And I feel like this type of format, like a stadium race, just like you were saying, it really would allow for that. Like, imagine how things would change in the U.S. series if they added a stadium race to it, where instead of almost a guaranteed lock that it's going to be Lindsay, Rhea, Nicole, Alyssa, or Ryan Woods, Ryan Atkins, like all the Ryan, like, you'd really see a huge shakeup if instead of getting guaranteed top 5 or 10, they might not beat some of the stadium specialists, and they might get 15th, and then they're really in trouble in terms of the points later in the year, like if there's a little bit of variety. So I know, obviously, I'm a little biased because I do a lot of stadium races, but I think that it would really make a big big good impression on people if they got to see just the close battles and just the different tactics. And I think it would be much better as a viewing experience as well.
They're fun to watch. Now, again, I mentioned I like the $1 Million Mile because I know the athletes, and there's got to be some if you don't know Ryan Atkins' story versus John Albin's story, if you don't know why that's an interesting race to watch the two of them race against each other, then it's a better race if you have someone sitting on the couch telling you the story, right? Well, not everyone has that, so you have to kind of do that backstory stuff. So I get that they got to do that. And Ninja Warrior does this constantly, and it makes it painful to watch. But Ninja Warrior, they clean up. And as far as reality television, Ninja Warrior does great. But people forget Ninja Warrior took years to get. It was on not GSN, but the
G4 or whatever.
Yeah. When it started, it was like a spin-off of a Japanese show that the Japanese show almost gets canceled every 2 years. But Ninja Warrior, it took 3 or 4 or 5 years maybe before it was really Ninja Warrior, and now it's like a behemoth, in the off season. So anyway, that's a whole topic by itself, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, my whole point was that there were some great battles there. No one got to see it, and it's a shame. Instead of watching people run up slowly up a mountain, I'm just saying there would have been a little better opportunity if they also invested in that type of race.
Jack, you mentioned your rankings. How can people find your rankings online?
Yeah, so we're doing a big upgrade right now behind the scenes. Probably in the next 2-3 weeks, you're going to see something really cool on yanceycamp.com. They've got a tab that says rankings at the top, and then look at 2019 rankings. You get to filter it by whichever week into the year. I think we're up to 25 or 26 right now. Everyone's graded on a 0 to 100 scale, and based on competition, who you face, and how well you've done. And you can break it down by gender and region. So a lot of the people who are consistently at the top of races, but they're not facing good competition, it'll reflect accordingly in the rankings. So go and check it out. I've got historical data on there too, but we've already talked about that plenty of times. But just go to yanceycamp.com. You'll find some cool stuff.
Jack, how can people follow you on social media?
Go to Instagram and Jack_Bauer_OCR. And I get a lot of messages from people just being like, hey, can you look up this random statistic for me? Do you have this? So I don't mind looking it up for you if there's something cool, because half the time I'm curious on it also.
Jack, any last thoughts before we go?
I can't wait for our Utah preview. We haven't really even discussed that, but that's coming up really, really soon, and a lot's at stake in the overall U.S. Series rankings. So I think it's going to be a phenomenal race and a lot of upsets.
Jack Bauer, thanks much.
All right, thanks, Will. We'll do this more often.
Special thanks to Jack Bauer for appearing in this episode. Well done, as always, Jack. Talk with you soon. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Check out World's Toughest Podcast and the other podcasts of the OCR Report, Overcome and Run, Obstacle Ring Adventures. We'll have lots more on World's Toughest Podcast coming soon. I'll talk with you later. Go spend time with someone you love.